Hello everyone. Today we will be talking about developing command line applications with React. I know that for some of you, or hopefully most of you, this is a new topic, so let's get and understand it. So, a little bit about myself. My name is Adir. I'm working at Wix for the past 8 years or so, and currently I'm part of the DevTools group at Wix, which is a group responsible for developing all the developer tools at Wix. Cover today, we will talk just a little bit about React, then we will really dive into command line applications, and then we will see how we can use React in order to develop command line applications, or CLIs in short. So React, I will start by showing some screenshots from the React documentation, and let's go over them. This is React, you all know and hopefully love. And this is how a React component looks like. Nothing new for most of you, I guess. We can also have some logic and statements in the component. We can add interactivity, nothing new, so let's go over it quickly. And we all know, or most of us know, that we can also write server code using React. Thanks to tools like Next.js and Remix and others, we can use the existing knowledge of React that we already have and develop both client-side and server-side applications, which is really nice. We can also use the existing React knowledge that we have to develop for mobile applications, right? Using tools like React Native, we can develop for iOS, Android, macOS, Windows, and again, we can use React, which we learn once, and we apply that knowledge to write for multiple platforms. So this is really great, and we will soon see how we can use React to develop CLIs. So let's talk about CLIs. This is a relatively short list of CLIs that I guess most of you know, from simple command and applications like CD and RM, to more complicated and big applications like Git, NPM, Yarn, Prettier, and the list goes on. But when some of you think about terminal or CLIs, I guess this is what you think about. This is not the best UX, not something that we want to use, and essentially not a good thing, right? This is not a convenient product. And if we will be honest, it is hard to develop great CLIs because we do have some constraints when we develop for the terminal. We can only use a very limited set of colors. We cannot control the font, neither the type or the size. We cannot use images. We have very basic animations and transitions, essentially only ASCII art, basically. We have very limited user input capabilities. Again, we can only get text from the user. Users cannot use the mouse. And even with what we can do, it is still pretty hard to pull off something that looks great and behaves well. But is this impossible and our CLIs have to be ugly? The question is no. We can definitely create great CLIs. This is just one example. You can see a great application flow. The user enters some data. This is interactive, colorful, but not too colorful. It looks nice. You can see some nice controls, radio buttons, checkboxes, that nice spinner and animated. And we can create great CLIs, right? So we will soon see how. And also, as an industry, we've already established some guidelines for how to create good CLIs. We have a lot of knowledge about creating great web applications, but CLIs, we didn't have that much of a knowledge, but now we do. This is a very partial list, and if you guys are interested in this topic, I really encourage you to open this link, clig.dev. This is a very, very long and great resource with a lot of guidelines and practical tips and examples to create CLIs. Again, I really encourage you to open it later and read it, and this is super long. Now, let's see a short example of a very simple CLI, and now we do that. I will jump over to VS Code. I hope this is good enough. Now, this is a very small code. This is a JavaScript code. I run it with Node.js, of course. And first, let's run it and explain it a little bit. So this simple script essentially go over the list of the ReactNext speakers. I took it from the website, so I hope I didn't miss anything. Anyone? I did miss myself, by the way, but that's fine. So this is the list of speakers. And then we have a function. It is called greetSpeakers, which get the speakers, iterate over them, and just say hello to everyone. So this is a very simple script, and we all understand what it does, right? But let's change it a bit. Currently, the script essentially adds a new line for each speaker. We want it to have a single line and just replace it. We want to first say hello to Josephine, and then to Kathleen, and so on, everything on a single line. So let's change it. I will clear the output, and let's make some changes. So currently, in order to log something to the console, we pretty much do console log. In order to replace a line, we cannot use console log because console log by default adds a new line. So we will use a lower level API. Let me import it. I will get it from node process, and that will be stdout. Stdout, it is standard output. Now, let's replace all the console logs. In the code, we have stdout.write. And now, let's also add a new line. If I will run this code, it will work pretty much exactly like before. But now we are using a lower level API, which gives us some more control. And let's see the control in a second. So we said that we don't want to have a new line for each speakers, but only a single line, which will be replaced. So in order to do that, I will first write the code and then explain it. So stdout.move cursor, we will move the cursor 0 points, or basically nothing, on the x-axis, and -1 points on the y-axis. And I will also then clear the line. Now, essentially, what this code does is let's run it in comments here. So first, we will say hello to Josephine, that's right. And then we adding a new line, right? So we will end up here. And now we wait a little bit, and then we move the cursor -1 points on the y-axis, which essentially move it to the line above. Then we clear the line, and then we iterate again. And we will say hello to the next speaker, and do it again and again and again. So let's run this code and see if it works. And as you can see, we are having a single line, which is continuously updated with the speaker and then replaced with done greeting. So by now, I hope that you've already learned something new, but let's talk about this code. This code is relatively low level, right? We pretty much go to the standard output and start to change it. We need to move cursors. This is relatively low level and imperative, and this is a basic example. If we will develop complicated applications like we do at Wix we have huge CLIs. This is not something that we want to do. This is relatively hard, and we want to do it in a better way. So let's see how we do it in a better way. And to see it, I want to show you guys how you can use React to develop CLIs. So first of all, I want to introduce you to Ink. Ink is essentially like React Native, but for terminal applications. With Ink, I can write React components. I take React code, and Ink will render it instead of for the DOM or for iOS or Android, it will render it to the terminal. So let's see some code. Let's get back to VS Code, and I will open a different file. Here, I will not be live coding it, I will just show you how it looks like. So let's clear it again, and let's start at the top. So here we import setTimeout, just as we did before, and then we import React. This is the regular React, nothing new, the React we all love and use. After React, we import Inc. From Inc, we take the render function and a text component. We will see it in a second. We have now the same list of speakers and a React component or a function basically, but let's minimize it for a second and look here. So this is the render function, we call it, we give it the React component and a prop. Again, this is just React, and React component gets props. So I give it a prop with the list of speakers. Now let's look at the component. I can use some states. Again, this is just React, nothing special about it. I have some state where I store the current speaker that I will be showing and the flag wherever I've done greeting everyone. And then I have a use effect, again, just React. The use effect will be invoked on mount, which in this case is when the command will run. And let's see what it does. So in the use effect, we again iterate over the speakers, set the state, wait a little bit, and then do it again. Just the same like we did before, but we do not output to the terminal directly, but just updating some state. And then after we've done, so we mark as done. Now let's look at the return value. If we haven't done greeting yet, so we greet the current speaker. And if we did, we say that we done greeting. In a second, I will get back to this color property. But first, let's run it. Let's run this code. And here I will use TSX because this is a JSX file. And I don't want to transpile it here, so TSX will do it on the fly. And you can see it works. So this is pretty nice. We can use React. This code was nothing new to most of you. A simple React component. The only new thing here is basically this import and the render function and the text component. And everything else, you know. So if you will get back to the previous file, in this case, you probably had to learn something, right? You had to learn what is stdout. Here I just gave you the solution, but you probably had to learn how to replace text within a line, which is again, relatively complicated. And here we have a simple component. It has a state. Whenever the state changes, the component re-renders. Super simple, like we know when we develop for the web. So this is a really nice example. And let's get back, I promised about the color. So let's talk about the color. This is how we color stuff in Inc. Essentially, we have a text component. I don't get autocomplete, so, but I do have over properties here. I can dim stuff, I can add a strike through, a lot of things. One of them is the color. And if I wanted to do it without Inc, so this is how it looks like. Essentially, to color stuff in the terminal, we have some special escape codes. And this is, again, super complicated, nobody remember it. We do have some external libraries, for example, Chalk is a popular one that kind of abstract it, but it is still pretty complicated. And with Inc, we only use a text component, it has a color prop, super simple. Now, let's get back to the presentation. So that's another example of Inc. You can see that I'm using a third-party component, Inc spinner in that case. I'm using it, I'm rendering the spinner and the loading text. And this is how it looks like. Super simple, looks pretty, animated, really nice. Let's take another example. In this case, I'm importing the select input component. I'm giving it some item, an on-change handler, doesn't really matter in this case, and then I render it, and this is what it looks like. Pretty nice and pretty simple. This is another one. Here you can see that I also have some state, and also that nice margin right property. Inc gives us a nice way to use CSS to style the applications, which again, we all know CSS, right? So we can just apply the margin right property, give it a value, render it, And this is what we get like. One last example. This is some data. We give it to a table component. And again, pretty nice and super simple, right? I've just used a React component. Now another one, which is not a component. Here we can use a hook, use std dimensions, which will return the dimensions of the terminal window. I'm getting back the columns and the rows and render them. Now if I will run this application, so we can see the data, and if I resize, it changes. And again, this is dynamic. I didn't have to move cursors and do stuff, it just works. I have a component, it uses some hook, the hook have a state, whenever the state changes, the component re-renders, right? Simple, we all know it, and this is how it works in the terminal. Exactly the same. And the best thing about it is that most of the React libraries that you know and love, they just work with Inc, because Inc uses React and it all works. Of course, if you use something that uses React DOM's API or browser's API, it won't work, right? Because we don't have the browser in the terminal, but everything that is just React or JavaScript works. And you might think yourself, no, it looks nice, but does anyone use it? So yeah, a lot of super popular tools and companies use it, from the GitHub Copilot for CLI, which is a relatively new one, to our very own Wix CLI, which my groups at Wix develop, to a lot of the others, Cloudflare CDI, Gatsby, Terraform, Beach, Shopify CLI, and a lot more. This is a partial list, of course. And now, let's see something even more amazing. Pastel. Pastel is a relatively new framework, and Pastel is like Next.js for the command line. With Pastel, I can use React to develop command line applications like we do with Inc, but I get a lot of super nice capabilities by simply following some conventions. So let's see another demo. This is the Pastel application that we will be showing. And first, let me run it. So this is a to-do app. Let's start by running to-do list. No tasks found. Great, we just started. Let's add a new task. To-do add, talk at ReactNext 2023. Let's list it. We have a new task. This is the task. This is an auto-generated ID. Looks great. Let's add another task. Let's give it live demo at ReactNext. And we can also use the verbose option. And now you can see that we also get some output. The previous add command didn't return anything. This one does. So we can add commands, add the tasks, we can list them, we can complete commands. Let's just to-do list again. We can see the new task. Let's complete a command. Let's complete the first one. I'm giving here the ID. I hope this is big enough. Maybe I will zoom one more. We can complete the task. If I will run to-do list again, I can see it marked differently. This is a complete task. I can also remove it entirely, so let's remove it, and to-do list again. So it's relatively simple to do application. Most of us do it when we experiment with new tools. This is to-do app. Nice. And now let's see at the code. So I will close it, so we will have more space for the code. And let's do it, or I can reset it more. That's fine. So this is the application, relatively simple NPM package. I have the package.js and everything. Again, JavaScript project, uses React. Now the entry point for the application is within the SRC folder, and this is the CLI file. This is the entry point. You can see that we import Pastel from Pastel. We initialize it. The only input for Pastel is import.meta. which is a relatively new ESM stuff. We will not go into it, but essentially what it allows Pastel to do is to traverse the directory or know this directory and then find the commands folder. So we give it import meta and run the application. This is the only wiring code that we have. Everything else is we get out of the box. Now let's look at the commands. Here we have some files. Those are the same names as the name of the commands that we've just seen. The add command, the complete command, list and remove. And now let's open the add command and close this one again. So here we can see, again, a relatively familiar React code. We have some new stuff. For example, in order to define the arguments that the command receives, for example, the add command receives the task title. So we export const args, and args will be the argument that the command will receive. So we have a single argument of type string, and this is its description. We'll see it in a second. And we have, again, some options, a single option, the verbose option, which we use to return some output from the command, right? This is a Boolean option, it defaults to false, and it also has some description. I want to show you that by defining it this way, using Xod and Pastel conventions, I can simply run to do help --help, and I get the help menu out of the box. I don't have any code that builds this output. Pastel does it automatically for me based on the stuff that I output from my file. So this is super nice. And let's get back to the code. So I exported the arguments that the command receives and the options. And I also need to export a default function, which is the component. In this case, this is the add component. Pastel will inject to it the arguments and the options. And now this is some simple JavaScript code. I'm taking the first argument and using it as the to-do title. I'm then having a hook, which will be invoked when the command is executed. I'm adding a new to-do to the sort of database. It is a JSON file here. We'll see it in a second. Let's see it right now, actually. So the use effect runs when the command runs. It executes a to-do, give it the title. If I will open it to do. So this load to do function basically just importing this file. This is my database for the application. So it imports the to do JSON. Let's open it again. It imports the to do JSON. I get it here. I'm creating a new item, giving it some random ID, the title. Then I'm merging the new task with the existing ones and saving it back to the JSON. So this is all the backend code of the application, super simple. So we are calling a to-do, and then we return some JSX. If I got the verbose option, I will return something. You can see again, this is React. I'm using some paddings. I can mark this text as bold and give it some color, and that's pretty simple and nice output. And if we are not in verbose mode, so it basically doesn't return anything. And then the command will just quit without showing any output. So this is the code of the add command. Relatively simple. You did have to learn some new stuff, basically the conventions, arguments, options, if you don't know Xod, so how to do stuff with Xod, but that's all essentially. This is just React, and you can now go ahead, add new commands by simply adding new files, and it will work. Let's see another command, the list command. In this case, we don't have any arguments or options, so we only export the component. I'm having some state. This is the to-do state. I'm loading the JSON file, setting it in the state. So this is a pretty simple use effect. And then I return the output. So if I don't have any task saved, I will show no task found. And if I do, I will start to build the output. So this is the box. I also have some flex. We said CSS, right? So display is flex, direction is column, some text. I'm iterating over the to-dos. I have again padding. This is a dim, so it will be a bit of gray. And that's pretty much that the JSX, nothing special about it. Simple React component, pretty nice, pretty simple, pretty familiar. A very nice tool. So this is about the code. And now let's see some tests. In Wix, we test everything. And command and applications, are not special here. So we test CLIs like we test applications. And let's see how we test that nice application. I'm also using it here, the built-in Node test runner, which is relatively new. And maybe let's run it for a second to see its output. So if I will run npm t is for test. You can see first, let's look at the command. So I'm running Node. Let me zoom. Running Node. I'm muting the warnings. I'm giving it some TypeScript test stuff to load TypeScript. And then we are running the -- test option and a pattern of the test files. So we are using Node built-in test runner to run the tests. And let's see how the tests look like. So we have a describe block, some before each, which will essentially create a new JSON file for each test. So each test will be isolated and have a fresh environment. And then let's look at the test. This is test for the add command, right? So we have a test that adds a task silently. And as you can see, it simply renders the component. If some of you guys test React applications, maybe you are doing something similar, right? Using tools like React Testing Library and others. You take a component, you give it some props, you render it, and you check the output. So again, using Pastel and Ink and CLIs, this is no different. I just render the component, I'm giving it the argument and the options. In this case, this is silently because verbose is false. And then I'm loading the JSON, which is my database again. I'm checking that I don't have any output because this is again a silent add, verbose was false. And I'm checking the content of the JSON file and make sure that the new task was indeed added. So this is a silent add. We also have a verbose add test. So in this case, it is exactly the same, but we give verbose true. We load the JSON. We check now that we do have some output. And again, checking the content and make sure the new tasks exist. We have some more tests. Let's see this one. In this case, we are testing the list command. We are creating a new JSON. We make sure that if we start with no data, with an empty JSON, so we get the no tasks found output. And if we start by saving some data and then we render, we check that we have some output. So this is the test. Pretty nice, right? And that was Pastel. I hope you guys enjoy it. You see how powerful it is, and I really encourage you to give it a try at your next CLI project.